shift focus now to the aviation sector because of an interesting announcement by Air India saying that it would give contracts to pilots post their superannuation for flying till the age of 65. That means they'll move it from 58 currently to 65. Now, while the DGCA allows pilots to fly till they are 65 years, airlines usually have their current retirement age at 58. In fact, Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, in a reply in Parliament, mentioned that there is a marginal shortage of commanders of certain types of aircrafts, but he reiterated that there's no shortage of commercial pilots. He went on to say that there are 862 commercial pilot licenses which were issued in 2021 by the DGCA, which is an all-time high. Meanwhile, for the shortage, there are special licenses which are issued to foreign aviation experts, which is not that high a number, but there are 9,000 commercial pilots in all in India. So what is the true picture emerging, and will we be seeing a manpower shortage going forward? We're not talking just about pilots. We've been seeing this with technicians, with aircraft maintenance personnel, and a lot of experts have been saying this is the reason for all of those delayed flights, etc. To speak more on this, I'm joined today by Abhishek Banerjee, practice lead at CAPA India, Jitendra Bhargava, former Air India Executive Director, and Captain Amit Singh, founder of Safety Matters Foundation. Captain Singh, let me begin with your take on the news from Air India. Now, I know this is allowed by DGCA, but in terms of practicality, why do a lot of airlines keep the cutoff at 58? Is it safe? Is it desirable to extend the age of the pilot to 65 years?
Well, from the operational aspect, a pilot is permitted to fly as long as the pilot has the flying license valid based on the medical condition. And typically a medical examination happens every 6 months for a pilot in India. And besides, they have additional checks and tests in the simulators. So this medical condition is determined by the DGCA based on international practices and the regulations prevalent in India. It is not surprising that Air India has done this, because it has been happening in the past also. The 58, the figure 58 is a government figure, PSU basically. The PSU had determined that all employees would retire after 55 or 58. It has nothing to do with the flying aspect or the skill of a pilot. The pilot can still fly till 65 as determined by the international agency, the UN body, which lays down the regulation and adopted by DGCA. So it is not surprising for an airline which is embarking on an expansion plan to hold on to their pilots and not let them go to other airlines, private airlines like Indigo. Most of them would have gone to Indigo had they retired or been let off from Air India. So when a airline invests a lot of money and time on the pilots, so it is best to retain them, and which is also a stopgap arrangement till their next generation of pilots are ready. So this is not surprising, but it is a very smart move in terms of long-term and short-term aspects.
All right. So, Abhishek Banerjee, if I'm to understand correctly, that Air India was the anomaly because it was a public sector company which got pilots to retire at 58, and extending to 65 years of age is absolutely fine. But what is your take on the question that came up in Parliament as well, that do we have a shortage of pilots right now in being able to keep up with the expansion plans of Indian aviation? What's your take on that point, where the minister said there's a shortage of some kinds of commanders of certain aircrafts? Can you just throw more light on what that could mean and what the scenario really is?
Well, typically, if you
that
look
question
at
for
an
Abhishek,
airline,
please. That question for Abhishek, please. Yes.
Hi, Tamana. Thanks for having me here. And I just like to start off saying that so the question is about experience, right? So for a period of career, as you can see, till the pilot reaches in his or her senior ranks, that's where the experience counts. And what we are probably going to see is with increasing long haul operations, increasing international operations that Indian operators are looking forward to, the need for more number of pilots is higher, and especially the need for experienced pilots is higher. And that's where the problem is arising. So we definitely have a number of new flight schools coming. IGRUA itself has grown for the last few years. It has grown into multiple centers now. So it is great. It's important to be increasing pipeline of new pilots coming on board. But as Captain Amit just said, it's very important that we retain the experienced pilots to be able to help us, uh, overcome the shortage in the next few years, in the next decade, especially. India overall is going to need around 12 to 14,000 additional pilots over the next decade. And that's a massive number. So even though we are increasing the number of pilots that are inducted into workforce, but if we look at the overall scenario, it is decreasing given if we don't increase the age of retirement, then we are not going to see the demand being met, especially at the higher end, the long haul international end. So that's my take, I would say. Um, Go ahead if you have any other question on this.
We are looking at current number of about 9,000. You're saying we'll need 12 to 15,000. Let me come to Mr. Bhargav on this point, and I'm asking this from a complete layperson, not trying to sound ageist at all. But in terms of a pilot flying till 65, as far as fitness levels go, as far as abilities for long haul flights, is this common practice?
Tamanna, let me put it this way, that Air India in the past has also had retirement age for pilots at 65. There was a shortage of pilots and the training of pilots costs a lot. So the easier course was to give extension to pilots and they keep flying the 777 aircraft, long haul flights. But one thing that we must put it across is that it does not impair safety element because pilots undergo tests every 6 months. Proficiency tests, medical tests they are subjected to. So it's an absolutely safe thing. So from the airline perspective, it is important that trained and experienced pilots are available on the roads so that they can expand their operations without bothering about the shortage of pilots. Now, when Minister made a statement, yes, there are certain kind of shortages that exist, but that is primarily related to aircraft type. If Air India has been flying 777 aircraft, Dreamliner aircraft, A320 they got enough pilots on the roads. And extension of retirement age to 65 only facilitates that. But take, for example, if Air India under Tata was to induct a new aircraft like A350. Now, if when you get this pilot, you do not have trained pilots in India. So you rely on expats to get it. So there will be a shortage till people are graduated from one aircraft to another. So that is how it has been going on in the industry for long. But when we talk of pilot shortage, it is basically because airlines adopt the course of getting trained and experienced pilots, poaching from another airline, rather than train the pilots and let them graduate within their own airline. So that is where the shortage comes in. Take, for example, Akash Airline, which came in. Now, they could not have got pilots, said, okay, we got fresh pilots and we are going to be training them ab initio and then make them fly. That would take them a long, long time. So the easier course is get pilots from other airlines. So temporarily, that airline may face shortage. And mind you, the pilot shortage currently is global in nature. Airlines like Lufthansa, Delta, and foreign airlines have been canceling flights for want of pilots. Let me also give you an additional information. The Delta Pilots Union, in fact, wrote a letter to the passengers traveling public that we have been overworking to ensure that flights are maintained, but we can no longer do it. And that is where in the early part of June and July, thousands of flights got cancelled. So there is a shortage, but not to the extent. And the best way to overcome is extend the retirement age because pilots are experienced, trained, and their medical requirement is taken care of. So it is not that something who is fragile, physically weak, will still be flying till 65. It's not a blanket kind of an extension given by an airline.
Yeah, so the extension is fine. The shortage is here to stay, but you talked about safety, and I think that's interesting and worth going into. So, Captain Amit Singh, safety is no problem. What about poaching? Now, we're going to possibly see more and more poaching going ahead. Does this mean also a turnaround in fortunes for aviation staff overall? And of course, pilots are possibly at the foremost of that. Because COVID-19, the pandemic, was a bad time for them. Are we going to see a turnaround in the kind of demand for these very highly trained skill sets?
Worldwide, there is a bit of a shortage, especially in the United States. And all the airlines are suffering because of that. Post-COVID, a lot of pilots have decided not to come back or pursue other careers, or there have been large-scale retirements, which were always due. So it is not unforeseen. It is how you calculate the demand for growth. No airline wants to keep an idle resource, which means invest in a pilot training and keep them idle for a year or year and a half till the market picks up. So nobody wants to do that hedging. They want to come in when the demand is there. They need a pilot to occupy the seat. So that is where the airlines go wrong. Pilot training takes about 6 months easily, between 3 to 6 months to come online. And the airlines need to plan in advance. So it is not about safety, but it is about how the airlines plan and the airlines culture. So you can do poaching, that happens, and you have seen a number of pilots moving from one airline to another for startups or otherwise for their own requirements. But when an airline takes pilots from 3 or 4 different airlines or sources, then they need to have a very strong airline culture so that these pilots do not get their own baggage from the other airlines or their own SOPs. So that kind of becomes a safety issue when every pilot, for example, if Indigo hires or they hired people from Sahara, from Kingfisher, from Air India, from Air Force. So you had 4 different cultures coming into Indigo. And the challenge for them was how to get people on the common platform, that is the Indigo culture. So how to get that Indigo culture, these pilots to follow that SOP. So the airline culture has to be very strong in that sense. So that is why for every airline, the beneficial way is to carry out a ab initio pilot program wherein they train a pilot from the beginning, from a commercial pilot license onwards to a captain. So she or he becomes a captain in that airline and grows with the airline. So that is in the interest of the airline for the long-term perspective. These are all short-term stopgap arrangements of poaching pilots from here and there, but it does not go down well as far as safety is concerned. And again, it affects the HR part also, the administration part, because your selection process has to ensure that the pilot whom you have selected will follow or imbibe your airline culture. That is where in the past we have seen a lot of differences and groups forming, and there are silos. So there are always conflicts within the organization because of these issues, and often translate to the safety issues. The Calicut accident is a typical example wherein we had the pilot from Air Force background coming in and could not basically uh, display or demonstrate his competency in the airline. Thereafter, he moved to Air India mainstream on 777. There again, there was an issue of competency, and moved back to Air India Express as a captain. So these frequent movements and coming from a different background and culture, so that affects safety in the sense that anybody coming on from Air Force has to come into the civilian life with the commitment that they have to leave the past baggage behind, because Air Force culture is typically mission oriented, that they have to complete the mission. That is what they're trained for. But the civilian culture is basically towards safety, maximizing safety, not completing the mission that is from A to B, but landing safely wherever the aircraft is the highest probability of landing is. So these aspects are not often looked at by the airlines, wherein when they go in for poaching or for
Right.
direct recruitment to cover the
And with
shortages.
new players on the block, that's possibly going to be a trend that continues. Fascinating conversation, but we'll have to wrap it here. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhargav, Mr. Banerjee, and Captain Singh for joining us today on the show. We'll take a very short break.